Ohio Governor John Kasich made history yesterday as Ohio became the first state in the history of this country to sell a state-owned prison to a for-profit private corporation. The Lake Erie Correctional Institute opened up in 2000, and at the end of this year will be officially owned and operated by the Corrections Corporation of America, also known as CCA, which shelled out $72 million to buy the facility from the state and will now get paid for every single new prisoner they lock up. CCA is the largest private prison corporation in America and made over $430 million in the last quarter of this year. And the guy who runs Ohio's Department of Rehabilitation and Correction and is thus in charge of overseeing the state's prison is a guy named Gary Moore, who just happens to be a former employee of CCA. But CCA is no stranger to getting what it wants, namely more prisoners to lock up for more profits. As a member of the right-wing American Legislative Exchange Council, which writes tailor-made legislation on behalf of its corporate members to hand off to state legislators to turn into laws, CCA has spent years writing and pushing legislation for stricter laws to throw more and more people in prison, particularly stricter drug laws. It's simple. If your business depends on locking people up, then you're going to push for legislation to lock up more people, whether it's good for the criminal justice system or society or not. Today, the United States has more people in prison, both as a percentage and in absolute numbers, than any other country in the developed world. And it appears the destructive nature of administering our criminal justice system based on a profit motive plays a huge role in our nation's exploding prison population, a fact that seems to elude Ohio Governor John Kasich. So how worrisome is it that corporate power is now creeping into the commons of our criminal justice system? And what are the consequences? Cliff Schechter joins me now. He's the National Progressive PR Strategist at Libertas LLC. Cliff, welcome back.
Thanks so much, Tom. How are you?
Just great. Before we get to this privatized prison, I know, Senate Bill 5, there's an awful lot going on in Ohio. You want to give us a quick thumbnail sketch of the democracy reaction movement that's going on in that state?
Well, it's amazing what's happened in reaction to Senate Bill 5. I mean, kind of like what you saw happen in Wisconsin, where two Republicans in deep red districts were recalled and the Republicans almost lost the state Senate. We don't have that recall mechanism, so you've got the bill is going to be on the ballot here in November. And I think you and I have discussed before, they needed somewhere around 200,000, a little under signatures. They got 1.3 million. So you're seeing the same grassroots fire here that you saw in Wisconsin, where people are just sick of this and they've seen, they've seen their livelihoods attacked. And in this state, excuse me, even more so than Wisconsin, they also took away collective bargaining rights from firefighters and policemen. So they even went a step further here, and they're suffering the backlash such that John Kasich has now tried to sit down and talk with people. Funny, he didn't want to do that before. I guess when you hit at a 30% approval rating or under, it's time to talk.
Yeah, I would guess. So privatizing a prison, who benefits from this?
Well, of course, private corporations. I mean, you had a great opening. The head of the rehabilitation and corrections here is, as you said, worked for CCA. CCA and GEO, the two biggest ones, made $2.9 billion last year. I mean, think about that for a second.
Is that revenue or profit?
They made, there was revenue, but I mean, it's just the fact that as Eisenhower warned us, of course, with a military-industrial complex, and this is no different. You talked about locking people up with war and drugs. What about the fact that these guys lobbied for the law in Arizona, SB 1070, because they wanted to create prisons specifically for illegal immigrants? That was what they were looking to do. They need more customers for their prisons. And again, this stuff's been proven a failure everywhere. In Florida, in Hernando County, for example, they had to actually, the prison there had to revert to the county because these guys did such a terrible job. And in the year after that, they saved $1 million. So this, it's a farcical notion that you save money with privatization of prisons. It just doesn't happen.
So John Kasich is pushing this thing, and he's presumably got the Republican legislature behind him.
Right.
First of all, does this require legislative action, or is this just something he can do as an executive order?
Just something he can do,
okay.
Quite sadly.
So is this about the money? Is this about the ideology? Is this, the camel's nose under the tent? Is this the first of many jails and prisons in Ohio that might be privatized? Is this something that's going to spread to other states around the area? Is there any Are there any indications of any of these things?
Yeah, well, a lot of things you said. Rick Scott, even in wake of the Florida case I talked about, still wants to privatize up to half of their prisons in Florida. As often you see with the right, it's not, things aren't mutually exclusive. It's more than one thing going on. One thing is ideologically, of course, these guys believe that, the sort of old Christian fundamentalist, punish everyone, throw them away, throw the key away, and lock them up. You've got that sort of that mentality going on, with the war on drugs and illegal immigrants and just sort of the police state that's the national security state that's kind of crept into how we treat people domestically. But also, corporations profit from this. Look, it's simple. As I said, look at the money that was made, in the last year by these two top guys. It doesn't include all the other players in this. This is what they want. This is their business model. I think right now almost 100,000 prisoners, I think 99,000 in this country, are in prisons privately controlled. Something like 264 facilities, and they plan to expand. I mean, again, how can you not see a conflict of interest in people that make money off of locking people up? One more thing. They have spent, I was just looking before, almost $7 million combined, most of it in states, to lobby, because it's the state legislatures that often give these guys what they want, and governors. But they've spent about $6 million of that $7 million, but $7 million overall. They're lobbying for tougher criminal statutes when it comes to drugs. They're lobbying for illegal immigrants, for prisons, as they call for illegal immigrants again. This is what they want. This is the country they want us to have, and it should be terrifying, really.
Well, it is. It's absolutely extraordinary. Cliff Schechter, thanks so much for being with us tonight.
Thanks a lot, Tom.
Before Governor Kasich signed on to the deal to hand over a state prison to the Correction Corporations of America, maybe he should have looked at what happened in Florida earlier this year with another for-profit prison that was run by CCA. You see, when things involve human beings, they really shouldn't be run for profit. I mean, fundamentally, I don't have a problem with, the car companies, for example, making cars, as long as they're regulated so that the cars are safe and they're not going to blow up on me. I don't have a problem with computer companies making computers or clothing companies making clothing. These are kind of things that you want. But schools, hospitals, and prisons, I mean, you've got people like Chris Whittle and Neil Bush who are making a fortune on schools. You got Bill Frist, whose family made billions with a B on hospitals, on taking public hospitals private, and basically just collapsing wages and screwing up services. Now CCA is making millions in private prisons. One county in Florida shows how stupid this idea is. This is the St. Petersburg Times, TampaBay.com. The headline, Hernando County's takeover of jail brings sweeping changes. And it's really quite an extraordinary story. Here's I think we've got a full screen graphic of the story. Here it is, yeah. Rusted doors, windows discolored and compromised by long-term water damage, cracked walls and floors, ceiling tiles and walls bubble. This is what the county found when they looked at this prison that had been run for 22 years by CCA. In fact, the article opens by saying, when the 39-year corrections veteran who's led the sheriff's office in its takeover of the Hernando County Detention Center last August, most of the 177 employees in the private company that had run the facility applied for new jobs. Page interviewed every one of those applicants. He hired just 45 of them. As he thought back on Thursday of the transition, the major said most of those he rejected either failed background checks or just didn't meet his standards. Frankly, Page said, I don't understand why a few of them weren't in jail. I mean, these are the kind of people the CCA is hiring. In fact, he went on, in total, with an annual jail budget of $10.9 million, jail officials say that they are saving taxpayers more than $1 million this year compared to what CCA would have charged the county. So you've got CCA making $460 million last quarter. Where do you think that money's coming from? It's coming out of things like, rotting walls and roofs and things not being maintained and crummy surfaces being provided. And somebody's making a buck. When it comes to things that have to do with human beings, human lives, the profit motive shouldn't be number one. The motive number one should be the good of society and the good of the people. It's really that simple.